You are sitting in the most exclusive tea room in Manhattan, minding your own business, when an elegant, terrified woman slides into the booth opposite you. She smells of expensive Chanel perfume and, faintly, of gunpowder. Before you can even call a waiter, she grabs your wrist, her heavy diamond rings biting into your skin, and whispers, "They are going to kill my son in exactly 3 minutes. When he walks through those mahogany doors, you must pretend to be his fiancée. Please." What do? You don't know it yet, but saying yes to this stranger is about to drag you into the bloodiest underworld war New York has ever seen. Lana Hayes was not the sort of woman who frequented the Grand Salon at the Baccarat Hotel. As a junior antique appraiser at a mid-level auction house, her budget usually allowed for lukewarm drip coffee, not $100 pots of Darjeeling. But today was her 26th birthday. She had just secured a promotion, and she wanted to celebrate in quiet luxury. She was in the middle of buttering a perfectly baked scone when the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't anything obvious. No alarms, no shouting, just a sudden, chilling drop in the ambient noise. Then a woman slipped into the plush velvet seat directly across from Lana. She was in her late 50s, breathtakingly austere, dressed in a tailored charcoal Dior suit. Her silver hair was swept into a flawless chignon, but her eyes, a striking, icy blue, were blown wide with a deeply concealed panic. She didn't look at Lana. Her gaze remained fixed on the reflection of the room in the mirrored walls. "Excuse me," Lana started, reaching for her purse. "I think you have the wrong table." The woman's hand shot out. Her grip was like a steel vice around Lana's wrist. "Do not stand up. Do not look toward the entrance," the woman murmured, her voice a low, melodic rasp, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. "My name is Camilla. In approximately 2 minutes, a man named Silas is going to walk through those doors. He is my son. You are going to stand up, throw your arms around his neck, and kiss him as if he is the love of your life." Lana's heart slammed against her ribs. She tried to pull her hand away, but the older woman's grip only tightened, the edge of a massive emerald ring digging painfully into Lana's bone. "Lady, you need to let go of me right now, or I'm screaming for security," Lana hissed, panic rising in her throat. "Security cannot help you. Look at the bar," Camilla whispered, her tone entirely devoid of bluff. "The man in the navy trench coat, and the one by the piano with the scarred jaw. They are Falco Syndicate hitmen. They are here to assassinate my son, because his arranged bride was murdered 40 minutes ago on the FDR drive. If they realize the alliance is broken, they will shoot him the second he crosses the threshold. You fit her description. You are going to be her." Lana's blood ran cold. She forced her eyes toward the bar. The man in the trench coat wasn't drinking. He was staring intently at the lobby doors, his right hand buried deep in his pocket. The pianist was playing, but the man leaning against the grand piano had eyes like dead, black glass. I can't," Lana choked out, the scone turning to ash in her mouth. "I'm nobody. I appraise old clocks." "Right now, you are his salvation," Camilla said, finally meeting Lana's eyes. The desperation in the older woman's face was raw and terrifying. "If you do not do this, he dies. And because you are sitting here with me, they will kill you next, simply to tie up loose ends. Do you understand me, child?" Before Lana could process the sheer absurdity and terror of the situation, the heavy mahogany doors of the Grand Salon parted. The man who walked in commanded the room without trying. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke midnight blue suit that emphasized the broadness of his shoulders. His face was all sharp, patrician angles, a strong jaw, a straight nose, and eyes the exact same piercing blue as Camilla's. Silas Moretti. He exuded an aura of calm, lethal authority. But as his eyes swept the room and landed on the men at the bar, Lana saw a micro-expression of realization cross his face. He slowed his pace. He knew. He knew he was walking into a trap, and he knew his backup wasn't there. "Now!" Camilla hissed, kicking Lana's shin under the table. "Go!" Survival instinct is a bizarre, overriding force. Lana didn't think. She stood up, knocking her teacup over in a clatter of fine china, and practically ran across the patterned carpet. Silas turned toward the commotion, his muscles instantly tensing, his hand dropping subtly toward the inside of his jacket. But before he could draw, Lana threw herself at him. Lana collided with Silas's solid chest, throwing her arms around his neck. She smelled expensive cologne, cedarwood and bergamot, underlined by the cold, metallic scent of the street. "Play along or we're both dead," she breathed frantically into his ear. "Your mother sent me." For a fraction of a second, Silas went entirely rigid. He was a man who lived his life anticipating betrayal from every shadow, and a stranger hurling herself at him in public usually meant a knife in the ribs. But the mention of his mother, combined with the lethal presence of the Falco men in his peripheral vision, made his razor-sharp mind snap the puzzle pieces together. His massive hands came up, wrapping around her waist with possessive, terrifying strength. He didn't just play along. He took control. Silas tilted Lana's chin up and brought his mouth down on hers. It wasn't a tentative, fake peck. It was a punishing, theatrical kiss meant to be seen from the back row of a theater. Lana gasped against his lips, her hands involuntarily clutching the lapels of his suit to keep from falling. His lips were warm, demanding, and utterly convincing. When he finally pulled back, Lana was dizzy, her cheeks flushed scarlet. Silas gave her a devastating, perfectly constructed smile, though his blue eyes remained hard and calculating. "Darling," he said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that sent a shiver down her spine. "I thought I told you to wait in the suite." Before Lana could stammer a reply, a slow, mocking clap echoed from the bar. The man with the scarred jaw walked toward them, flanked by the one in the trench coat. The ambient chatter in the salon had completely died. "Silas," the scarred man said, stopping a few feet away. "What a beautiful scene. We were starting to worry. Word on the street was that your shipment from the Bianchi family got derailed on the highway. Yet here she is." Silas kept one arm tightly clamped around Lana's waist, pulling her flush against his side. "Matteo, you shouldn't believe every rumor you hear in the gutter. As you can see, my fiancée is perfectly safe, and quite eager to celebrate our engagement." Matteo's dead eyes shifted to Lana, dissecting her. Lana felt like a mouse being observed by a viper. She forced herself to lift her chin and look back at him, praying her knees wouldn't give out. "She doesn't look much like the photos of Sofia Bianchi," Matteo noted, a dangerous smile playing on his lips. "People rarely look like their DMV photos, Matteo." Camilla's voice cut through the tension like a scythe. She had approached from behind, her posture regal. "Now, unless Enzo Falco sent you here to offer us a wedding gift, I suggest you return to whatever hole you crawled out of. You're ruining our afternoon tea." Matteo's jaw tightened. He looked at Silas, then at the discreet bulge under Silas's jacket. The element of surprise was gone. An assassination in a crowded luxury hotel was only viable if it was quick and clean. A shootout with Silas Moretti and his mother was neither. "My regards to the happy couple," Matteo sneered, taking a step back. "I'm sure the wedding will be a blast." He turned and signaled his partner. The two men walked out of the salon, leaving a suffocating silence in their wake. The second the doors closed behind them, Silas's grip on Lana changed from a lover's embrace to a warden's hold. "Walk," he commanded in a low, furious whisper. "Straight to the garage. Do not look back. Do not speak." Lana was swept out of the Baccarat Hotel, flanked by Silas and Camilla. They moved through the opulent lobby with terrifying speed, taking a private service elevator down to the subterranean parking garage. A massive black SUV with tinted windows was idling by the exit, its rear doors already swung open by a man in a dark suit holding an earpiece. Silas practically shoved Lana into the leather back seat, climbing in immediately after her, while Camilla took the front. "Go! The Hamptons compound! Now!" Silas barked at the driver. As the SUV peeled out into the Manhattan traffic, Lana finally found her voice. "Okay, I did what you asked. I saved your life. Now let me out at the next corner. I have a cat to feed." Silas turned his head slowly. The charm he had displayed upstairs was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, predatory darkness that made Lana shrink back against the leather upholstery. "You aren't going anywhere," Silas said, his voice flat. "You've just been introduced to the Falco Syndicate as my future wife. If I let you out on that corner, you will be dead before your feet hit the pavement." The drive to the Hamptons was a blur of highway lights and suffocating silence. Lana sat pressed against the cold window, her mind racing through every conceivable escape plan, only to discard each one. Silas spent the entire 2 hours on a burner phone, speaking in rapid, hushed Italian. The words were foreign to her, but the tone was unmistakable, violent, strategic, and ruthless. When they finally turned off the Montauk Highway, it wasn't onto a typical wealthy estate. The SUV passed through a set of imposing wrought-iron gates, flanked by stone pillars where armed men visibly stood guard in the rain. They drove up a winding, tree-lined driveway that opened up to a sprawling, modern fortress masquerading as a luxury mansion. The moment the car stopped, Silas was out. He didn't wait to open Lana's door. He stalked toward the front entrance, a man burdened by war. Camilla sighed from the front seat, turning back to look at Lana. The panic from the tea room had faded, leaving behind the hardened matriarch of a criminal empire. "Come inside, Lana," Camilla said softly. "It is cold, and we have much to discuss." "How do you know my name?" Lana demanded, refusing to move. "While you were sitting with me, one of my men cloned the data on your phone," Camilla replied smoothly, as if discussing the weather. "Lana Hayes, 26, appraiser at Sotheby's offshoot, no criminal record, orphaned at 19, no siblings, a tragic background, but highly convenient for our current predicament." Lana felt completely violated, her breath hitching. "You people are monsters." "We are survivors," Camilla corrected, stepping out of the car. "Now come, I will not ask twice." Lana followed her into the house. The interior was stunning, minimalist, filled with millions of dollars worth of modern art and sharp edges. But it felt like a mausoleum. She was led into a massive study where Silas was pouring himself 3 fingers of scotch. He didn't offer her any. He threw the glass back, set it down with a heavy thud, and turned to face his mother. "Are you insane?" Silas roared, the sudden volume making Lana jump. "You brought a civilian into this? Do you know what Enzo Falco does to civilians?" "Sofia Bianchi is dead, Silas," Camilla shouted back, matching his ferocity. "Enzo's men intercepted her convoy. He wanted to break the Port Alliance. If you walked into that hotel without a fiancé, Matteo would have put a bullet in your head to finish the job." Silas pinched the bridge of his nose, taking a deep, ragged breath to control his temper. He turned his glacial blue eyes on Lana. She was trembling, standing awkwardly in her modest pencil skirt and blouse amidst the high-end luxury, clutching her purse like a shield. "Do you know who we are?" Silas asked her quietly. You're the Mafia," Lana whispered. "The Moretti family," Silas corrected. "And the men who just left the hotel are the Falcos. We are currently trying to secure a multi-billion-dollar shipping route. The politicians turning a blind eye to this route demanded proof of stability. The marriage to Sofia Bianchi was that proof. It meant 2 major families were united. Enzo Falco just murdered her to throw us into chaos and steal the route." "What does this have to do with me?" Lana pleaded, tears of sheer frustration prickling her eyes. "I don't care about shipping routes. Let me go." Silas stepped closer, his physical presence overwhelming. "I can't let you go, Lana. Matteo saw your face. He thinks you are the replacement bride. He thinks my family is holding our alliance together. If you go back to your little apartment, Enzo's men will torture you to find out who you really are, and then they will cut you into pieces." Lana's knees finally gave out. She sank into a leather armchair, burying her face in her hands. "This is a nightmare." "No, it is a business transaction," Silas said, crouching down so he was at eye level with her. His voice softened, just a fraction, revealing a dangerous charisma. "Here is the deal, Miss Hayes. You will live in this house. You will wear my ring. You will attend the galas, the dinners, and you will smile for the cameras as my devoted fiancée. You give me 1 month to dismantle Enzo Falco's operation and avenge Sofia." Lana looked up, a tear tracking through her foundation. "And after a month?" "After a month," Silas said, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips, a ghost of the kiss they shared lingering in the air between them. "I will publicly break off the engagement. We will stage a tragic falling out. I will wire $10 million into an offshore account in your name, and you can disappear anywhere in the world." $10 million. It was a sum so absurd Lana couldn't even conceptualize it. "And if I say no?" she asked. Silas stood back up, the warmth vanishing from his eyes. "If you say no, I walk you out the front gates tonight, and you can see how far you get before Matteo finds you." It wasn't a choice. It was an ultimatum wrapped in velvet. Lana looked at the devastatingly handsome, utterly terrifying man standing before her, and then at the imposing mother who had dragged her into this hell. "I'll need a new wardrobe," Lana said, her voice shaking but resolute. "And I'm not sleeping in your room." A slow, genuine smirk touched the corner of Silas's mouth. "We'll see about that, Miss Hayes." The transformation began at dawn. Lana awoke in a guest suite that was larger than her entire Upper West Side apartment. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, the view overlooked the grey, churning Atlantic Ocean, and the reality of her situation hit her with the force of a physical blow. She was a hostage playing house with a murderer. A sharp knock on the door preempted the entrance of a small army of women, led by Camilla. They wheeled in racks of clothing wrapped in plastic, carrying garment bags, stamped with names Lana had only ever seen in the glossy pages of Vogue. Valentino, Oscar de la Renta, Alexander McQueen. "You are no longer an appraiser of dusty clocks," Camilla announced, waving a hand to dismiss Lana's simple cotton pajamas. "You are now Lana Bianchi, a distant, highly protected niece of the Bianchi patriarch, educated in Switzerland, kept out of the family business until yesterday. It explains your lack of a public footprint and justifies Silas throwing the previous arrangement out the window for you." "And the Bianchis are just going to go along with this?" Lana asked, letting a seamstress measure her waist with terrifying speed. "The Bianchis lost their daughter yesterday," Camilla said, her tone softening just a fraction, though her eyes remained hard. "They want Enzo Falco's head on a spike. If pretending you are their blood helps us destroy him, they will swear you are the ghost of their ancestors if we ask them to." For 3 hours Lana was plucked, polished, and painted. Her mousy brown hair was transformed into a sleek, rich mahogany blowout. Her subtle makeup was replaced with something sharper, more predatory, smoky eyes and a bold, blood-red lip. When she finally looked in the full-length mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. The door opened behind her, and Silas stepped into the room. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his presence immediately sucking the oxygen from the space. The seamstresses and stylists practically evaporated, leaving the two of them alone in the vast dressing room. Silas's eyes swept over her. For a split second, the cold, calculating syndicate boss vanished, replaced by a man genuinely struck by the vision in front of him. Lana was wearing a form-fitting emerald green silk dress that draped perfectly over her curves, a slit running daringly up her left thigh. "It passes muster," Silas said finally, his voice slightly rougher than usual. "High praise from a man holding me at gunpoint," Lana shot back, turning to face him. She refused to let him see how much his gaze unsettled her. Silas ignored the barb. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a black velvet box. He flipped it open. Sitting on a bed of white satin was a diamond so large and flawless it almost looked fake. It was a flawless, emerald-cut stone flanked by tapered baguettes, set in platinum. "Give me your left hand," he ordered. Lana hesitated. Putting on the ring felt like crossing a threshold she could never uncross. Silas stepped closer, invading her personal space. The scent of cedarwood and danger washed over her. He didn't wait for her to comply. He gently but firmly took her left hand. His fingers were warm, rough with calluses that she suspected didn't come from a golf club. He slid the heavy ring onto her fourth finger. It fit perfectly. "An antique," Silas murmured, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. It was a fleeting, intimate touch that sent an unwelcome jolt of electricity up her arm. Sourced from a private vault in Geneva. Not Harry Winston, not Cartier. Untraceable but undeniably royal. It belonged to a Russian duchess before the revolution. "If anyone asks, I bought it for you 3 months ago in secret." "It's heavy," Lana whispered, staring at the glittering stone. "The weight is the point," Silas replied, his blue eyes locking onto hers. "Never take it off. Not in the shower. Not in your sleep. Tonight, we have dinner at Carbone in the city. My capos need to meet the woman who nearly started a war. You will sit beside me. You will smile. You will speak only when spoken to, and you will act utterly devoted." Lana lifted her chin, the emerald silk rustling. "I'll play your game, Silas. But don't mistake my survival instinct for submission. I'm doing this for $10 million and my life. Nothing more." Silas leaned in, his mouth mere inches from her ear. "Keep telling yourself that, Lana. But in my world, the lines between pretending and reality have a habit of bleeding together." The private dining room at Carbone in Greenwich Village was a sanctuary of dark wood, red velvet, and suffocating tension. The table was seated with 8 men who looked like they had stepped out of a violent, high-stakes boardroom. These were Silas's capos, the lieutenants of the Moretti Syndicate. Lana sat at Silas's right hand, the massive diamond catching the dim light of the chandelier. She played her part flawlessly. She laughed at the appropriate times, sipped her Barolo wine, and kept her hand resting lightly on Silas's forearm, just as Camilla had instructed. Every time she touched him, she felt the rigid tension in his muscles. Silas was a coiled spring, his eyes tracking every movement in the room, analyzing every word spoken by his men. He was testing their loyalty. Someone had leaked the route of the original bride, Sophia. Someone at this table could be a traitor. The dinner was wrapping up when the mahogany doors of the private room swung open. The two massive Moretti guards stationed outside had been shoved aside. Standing in the doorway was a man who commanded immediate, terrified silence. Enzo Falco. He was older than Silas, perhaps in his late 60s, with a silver mane of hair and a face lined with decades of ruthlessness. He leaned on a silver-tipped cane, wearing a bespoke pinstripe suit. Behind him stood Matteo, the scarred hitman from the Baccarat Hotel, and 4 other heavily armed enforcers. Every Moretti capo at the table stood up instantly, hands dropping to the weapons hidden under their jackets. Silas didn't stand. He casually picked up his wine glass, his face an impenetrable mask of ice. He reached under the table and placed his large hand firmly over Lana's knee, a silent command for her to stay completely still. "Enzo," Silas said, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "You're trespassing in my dining room. That's a breach of protocol. And you know I don't tolerate breaches." Enzo offered a terrible, reptilian smile. "Silas, my boy, forgive the intrusion. I was dining out front and heard you were celebrating your sudden pivot in marital plans. I felt it was only right to offer my congratulations." Enzo's dark, hollow eyes slid to Lana. She felt a cold sweat break out down her spine. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with the promise of violence. "So, this is the Bianchi girl," Enzo mused, tapping his cane softly on the hardwood floor. "Funny. I spoke to the Bianchi patriarch this morning to offer my condolences on his daughter's tragic accident on the FDR. He seemed quite distressed. He didn't mention he had a spare niece ready to fill the void." "Grief makes men forgetful," Silas replied smoothly, taking a sip of his wine. "Lana and I have been quietly involved for a year. Sophia's death was a tragedy, but it expedited our timeline. The Port Alliance remains intact, Enzo. The shipping routes remain under Moretti Bianchi control." Enzo stepped closer to the table. Silas's grip on Lana's knee tightened until it bruised. "An alliance built on a ghost and a replacement," Enzo whispered. "It's fragile, Silas. Almost as fragile as the security surrounding Sophia's motorcade. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Who holds the keys to your house? Because someone handed me the itinerary to that motorcade on a silver platter." A deadly silence fell over the capos. They exchanged paranoid glances. Enzo had just dropped a bomb, intentionally sowing discord in Silas's ranks. "Get out, Enzo," Silas said softly. It wasn't a shout, it was a promise of death. Enzo chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Enjoy your dessert, Lana. In this family, widows are made faster than brides." With that, Enzo turned and walked out, his men filing out behind him like shadows. The second the door closed, Silas stood up, the chair violently scraping against the floor. "We leave. Now." They moved as a tactical unit out the back exit of the restaurant. The damp night air of the alley hit Lana's face, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the dining room. An armored black Maybach was waiting, the engine idling with a low, aggressive purr. Silas practically threw Lana into the back seat, sliding in beside her as the driver gunned the engine. The car shot out of the alley and onto the rain-slicked streets of Lower Manhattan. "He knows," Lana whispered, her hands shaking violently as the adrenaline crashed. "He knows I'm a fake." "He suspects," Silas corrected, his jaw clenched so tight, a muscle ticked in his cheek. He was staring out the window, his mind running 1,000 miles an hour. "And he just confirmed we have a rat in my inner circle." They were speeding down the West Side Highway when the night exploded. It happened in a fraction of a second. A deafening crack shattered the silence, followed by the terrifying sound of heavy-caliber metal striking armored glass. The passenger side window right next to Lana's head spiderwebbed into a million white lines. "Down!" Silas roared. Before Lana could process the gunshot, Silas lunged across the wide leather seat. He tackled her, driving her down into the floorboards of the Maybach. His massive, heavy body covered hers completely, pressing her into the plush carpet. The car swerved violently as the driver initiated evasive maneuvers. More gunshots rang out, dull thuds against the reinforced steel chassis. Lana screamed, burying her face in Silas's chest, her hands clutching his pristine suit jacket as if it were a lifeline. "Keep driving! Don't engage! Get us to the safe house!" Silas yelled to the driver over the chaos. Beneath him, Lana was hyperventilating, the smell of gunpowder and burning rubber filling the cabin. She was pressed so tightly against Silas, she could feel the heavy, rapid thumping of his heart against her ribs. He had thrown himself over her without a second thought, shielding her with his own flesh and blood. He looked down at her, his face inches from hers in the dark footwell of the speeding car. The cold, calculating mob boss was gone. In his eyes was a raw, primal ferocity. He brought one hand up, his thumb roughly wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I've got you," Silas whispered fiercely, the vibration of his voice rumbling against her chest. "I swear on my life, Lana. No one touches you." For the first time since she sat down in that tea room, Lana realized the most terrifying thing wasn't that she might die. The most terrifying thing was that she was starting to trust the monster, keeping her alive. The armored Maybach didn't stop until it plunged into the subterranean depths of a private parking garage beneath the Woolworth building in Tribeca. The massive steel doors rolled shut behind them, sealing them in a concrete bunker of silence. Silas didn't wait for his men. He kicked his door open, circled the car, and hauled Lana out. Her legs were weak, trembling so violently she nearly collapsed against the fender. Without a word, Silas swept her into his arms, carrying her bridal style toward a heavily fortified private elevator. "I can walk," she lied, her voice a ragged whisper against his throat. "Don't waste your breath, Lana," he commanded, his chest heaving slightly. His eyes were scanning every shadow, his hand resting on the holster beneath his ruined suit jacket. The elevator shot upward, bypassing the commercial floors and opening directly into a sprawling, two-story penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, glittering view of the Manhattan skyline, a stark contrast to the violence they had just escaped. The space was hyper-modern, sterile, and smelled faintly of ozone and expensive leather. It was a ghost apartment, a multi-million-dollar panic room in the sky. Silas set her down gently on a massive sectional sofa. He immediately walked to a wet bar, grabbed a bottle of Macallan 25, and poured 2 neat glasses. He handed her one, wrapping his large hands over her shaking fingers to ensure she didn't drop it. "Drink," he ordered softly. Lana threw it back. The amber liquid burned down her throat, grounding her. As she lowered the glass, Silas reached out, his thumb gently grazing her cheekbone. She hissed in pain. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice dropping an octave. A tiny shard of bulletproof glass had grazed her cheek during the ambush. He disappeared into a hallway and returned a moment later with a first aid kit. Silas knelt before her, a king bowing to a pawn. He cleaned the superficial cut with a careful, terrifyingly tender precision. Lana watched his face, the sharp lines of his jaw, the heavy furrow of his brow. This was a man who ordered assassinations, who ran an empire of blood and shadow, yet his touch was lighter than a feather. "Why did you cover me?" she asked, the silence of the penthouse pressing in on them. "If you die, your syndicate falls apart. I'm just a decoy." Silas stopped, the antiseptic wipe hovering in the air. He looked up, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. The mask of the untouchable Don had cracked, because the moment I put that ring on your finger, you became mine to protect, Silas said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "And I do not lose what is mine, Lana. Ever." The air between them grew thick, the adrenaline of the ambush melting into a different, more dangerous kind of heat. Silas leaned in, the space between their lips vanishing. He kissed her, and this time there was no audience. There was no mother watching, no rival mob boss to deceive. It was a bruising, desperate kiss, tasting of scotch and survival. Lana's hands found his hair, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to the storm that was Silas Moretti. But the real world rarely waits for romance. A heavy knock sounded at the elevator doors, followed by a voice over the intercom. "Boss, it's Harrison. We secured the perimeter. We need to talk." Silas pulled back, his chest rising and falling heavily. He rested his forehead against hers for a fleeting second, a silent promise, before standing up. The cold, impenetrable mob boss returned instantly. "Let him in," Silas told the intercom. Harrison Cole stepped out of the elevator. He was the Moretti family's chief financial officer and Silas's most trusted advisor, a polished, Ivy League-educated lawyer who managed the legitimate shell companies. He looked pale, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Silas." "Thank God," Harrison breathed, stepping into the living room. "The Falcos hit 3 of our shipping yards in Red Hook simultaneously. It's a coordinated siege. How did they know your route tonight?" Silas walked slowly toward the bar, pouring himself another drink. He didn't offer one to Harrison. "That is the question, isn't it, Harrison? How did Enzo know my route to Carbone? How did he know Sofia Bianchi's route on the FDR?" "We must have a leak in the lower ranks," Harrison said quickly, pacing the floor. "A driver, a guard." "I checked the encrypted logs while we were driving here," Silas said smoothly, taking a sip of his scotch. He turned around, leaning against the marble counter. "Only 3 men had access to both at itineraries. Me, my mother, and you." Harrison froze. "Silas, you can't possibly think—" "I don't think. I know," Silas interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "I had my cyber team dig into your offshore accounts during dinner. A dummy corporation in the Cayman Islands, under your wife's maiden name, received a wire transfer of $5 million from a Falco shell company yesterday morning, right before Sophia's motorcade was hit." Lana watched from the sofa, her breath catching in her throat. The betrayal in the room was suffocating. Harrison's polished veneer shattered. He took a step back toward the elevator, his hands raising in surrender. "Silas, listen to me. The Bianchis are old blood. They refuse to modernize the ports. Enzo promised to digitize the smuggling routes, to increase profits by 40%. It was just business. I was trying to save the syndicate from obsolescence." "You handed an innocent woman over to be butchered on a highway," Silas said, stepping away from the bar. He drew a suppressed Sig Sauer from his shoulder holster with terrifying fluidity. "And tonight, you tried to hand over the woman I am going to marry." "Silas, please!" Harrison begged, falling to his knees, his tears ruining his expensive suit. "We've known each other since prep school. I'm your brother." "You were," Silas corrected softly. Lana shut her eyes and clamped her hands over her ears. She heard the muffled, mechanical phut of the silenced weapon. Just once. Then, the heavy thud of a body hitting the hardwood floor. When she opened her eyes, Silas was standing over Harrison's body, his face entirely blank. He holstered his weapon and pulled out his phone, dialing a cleanup crew. He didn't look at Lana. He didn't want her to see the monster he truly was. But Lana didn't scream. She didn't run. She looked at the diamond ring heavy on her left hand. She had entered this world as a hostage, but as she watched Silas bear the weight of executing his oldest friend to protect his family and her, she realized she was no longer an outsider playing a part. The memory of the Woolworth penthouse lingered like a phantom over the final weeks of their arrangement. Lana could still hear the muffled, mechanical phut of Silas's suppressed weapon. She could still see the pristine hardwood floor, marred by the sudden, violent end of Harrison Cole, a man who had sold his loyalty for Falco money. But more than the blood, what haunted Lana was the chilling, absolute detachment in Silas's eyes as he executed his oldest friend to ensure her survival. Following that night, a palpable, suffocating frost settled over Silas Moretti. The desperate, bruising kiss they had shared in the panic room was locked away in a vault of his own making. He retreated behind the impenetrable mask of the syndicate boss. The sprawling Hamptons estate was transformed overnight from a gilded cage into a fortified war room. The minimalist dining table, usually adorned with imported orchids, was now buried under tactical maps, encrypted laptops, and satellite feeds of shipping terminals from Newark to Red Hook. Capos moved through the hallways like ghosts, speaking in hushed, violent Italian. Lana watched it all from the periphery. She saw the exhaustion etching deep lines around Silas's piercing blue eyes. She saw the subtle way he favored his left side, bruised from the Maybach ambush. For 21 days, Silas waged a scorched earth campaign against the Falco Empire. With Harrison's financial ledgers cracked wide open, Silas didn't just attack Enzo Falco's men, he decimated his infrastructure. Warehouses burned in the dead of night. Corrupt port authorities were strong-armed into switching allegiances. Enzo's illicit cargo was seized, dumped, or rerouted under the Moretti banner. Through the carnage, Lana was expected to maintain the flawless facade of Lana Bianchi. She became a master of the illusion. At a high society charity gala at the Museum of Modern Art, surrounded by Picassos and a sea of oblivious Manhattan elites, she played the devoted fiancée with terrifying perfection. She smiled for the flashbulbs, her hand resting gracefully on Silas's tuxedo sleeve, the massive Russian Duchess diamond catching the ambient light. She laughed at the dry jokes of city aldermen and wealthy socialites, all while knowing the man beside her had ordered a raid on a Queen's casino just 20 minutes prior. She felt the heavy, admiring stares of the city's elite, the untouchable power couple. They had no idea that beneath the bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, Silas was wearing a Kevlar vest, or that Lana's heart hammered against her ribs every time a waiter approached them too quickly. When Silas touched her in public, a hand resting on the small of her back, a feigned, intimate whisper against her ear, it felt like a live wire. But the second the armored SUV doors closed on the way home, the physical distance between them returned, a vast, freezing ocean he refused to cross. Then came the 30th day, the expiration date. The war was decisively over. Enzo Falco, stripped of his resources, his capos and his pride, had fled on a rusted freighter bound for Sicily, an exiled king of nothing. The Moretti Bianchi shipping routes were secured, ironclad and undisputed. The alliance was safe. Lana was sitting alone in the estate's massive 2-story library, staring out through the rain-streaked windows at the churning, grey Atlantic Ocean. The house was unnervingly quiet for the first time in a month. The guards had scaled back. The capos had returned to the city. The heavy oak doors clicked open. Silas stepped into the room. He had shed his suit jacket, wearing only a crisp white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing the faint edge of a dark tattoo on his left wrist. He looked utterly drained, yet impossibly striking. He walked toward the heavy mahogany desk and tossed a thick, unmarked manila envelope onto the polished wood. The dull slap echoed in the silent room. "It is finished," Silas said. His voice was entirely flat, stripped of the gravelly warmth she had briefly known. He did not look at her. His gaze was fixed on the storm brewing over the water. "Enzo is gone. The syndicate is stabilized. There will be no retaliation." Lana stood up slowly, her stomach tying itself into painful, tight knots. "And the envelope?" "Your compensation, as outlined on day 1, Silas replied, his jaw tight. "Inside is a freshly minted, clean passport under the name Lana Davis, a new social security number, a secure encrypted phone, and the routing numbers to an untraceable account at Coates Bank in Zurich. $10 million has already been wired and cleared." Lana stared at the unremarkable brown paper. It was everything she had begged for when Camilla had first dragged her into this nightmare. It was absolute freedom. It was safety. It was a life where she would never have to check the shadows or listen for the crack of sniper fire. "My driver is idling in the courtyard," Silas continued, his tone clinical, as if negotiating a bulk freight contract. "He will take you directly to Teterboro Airport. A private Gulfstream is fueled and waiting on the tarmac. The pilot has instructions to fly you to Paris, but you can redirect him to anywhere in the world once you are airborne. I suggest somewhere quiet. Florence. Or perhaps the Maldives." "And what happens to Lana Bianchi?" she asked, her voice trembling just slightly. "I have already drafted the press release," Silas said, finally turning to face her. His blue eyes were cold, shuttered windows. "It will be leaked to Page 6 and the global trades tomorrow morning. The statement will express my deepest regrets that the immense, suffocating pressure of my public life was too much for you to bear. A tragic, mutual parting of ways. It happens every day in this city. You will be a ghost, Lana. You are safe now." Lana walked around the edge of the mahogany desk, her footsteps silent on the Persian rug. She stopped 3 feet away from him. The physical distance felt insurmountable, yet he was right there. "You're dismissing me," she said, the realization settling heavily in her chest. "I am fulfilling my end of a business transaction," Silas corrected, his hand sliding into his pockets, a defensive posture she had learned to recognize. "You saved my life in the Baccarat. You provided the cover I needed to root out Harrison and destroy Enzo. You played your part flawlessly. Now, the curtain falls. Take the money, Lana, and go live a beautiful, ordinary life." Lana looked at the envelope, and then she looked at the heavy, brilliant diamond resting on her left hand. She had worn it for 30 days. It had become a part of her, a symbol of the terrifying, chaotic, profoundly real world she had been dragged into. "What if I don't want an ordinary life?" Lana whispered. Silas's breath hitched, a microscopic fracture in his iron composure. "Don't be foolish. You appraise antique clocks. You drink Earl Grey tea. You do not belong in a world where men are shot dead in penthouses for signing the wrong ledger. My world is blood, Lana. It is dark, it is violent, and it corrupts everything it touches. I will not let it corrupt you." "You don't get to decide what corrupts me, Silas," she fired back, a sudden surge of heat flooding her veins. She stepped closer, invading his space, forcing him to look down at her. "You don't get to play the tragic, solitary mob boss with me. I was in that Maybach. I felt you throw your massive body over mine. I felt your heart beating out of your chest because you were terrified I was going to die. I saw what it cost you to pull that trigger on Harrison." "Lana, stop," Silas warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous, ragged whisper. "No, I won't stop," she challenged, reaching down to grab his hand. She pulled it from his pocket and pressed his palm flat against her chest, right over her racing heart. Silas went completely rigid at the contact, his eyes wide. "Look at me," she demanded. "I don't want the $10 million. I don't want a penthouse in Paris, and I don't want to be a ghost. I want the man who kissed me in a panic room like the world was ending. I want the real thing, Silas." Silas stared down at her, a brutal war raging behind his eyes. He tried to pull his hand away, tried to preserve the walls he had built to keep her safe from himself. But Lana held on with a fierce, unyielding grip. "This isn't a game of pretend anymore," Lana said softly, her thumb brushing over his knuckles. "Unless you can look me in the eye right now, completely sober, and tell me you feel absolutely nothing for me. If you can do that, Silas, I will take that envelope and you will never see my face again." The silence in the library was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic crashing of the waves outside. Silas looked at her defiance, her courage, and the undeniable truth shining in her eyes. The realization hit him that letting her walk out that door would be a fatal wound he could never survive. With a sudden, guttural groan of defeat, Silas's control snapped. He didn't just step forward, he practically devoured the space between them. His massive hands gripped her waist, hauling her flush against his solid frame, and his mouth crashed down on hers. It was an earth-shattering collision, a kiss of absolute surrender and desperate ownership. Lana gasped into his mouth, her arms instantly wrapping around his neck, anchoring herself to the storm. Silas kissed her until they were both breathless, backing her up until her hips hit the edge of the mahogany desk. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, his breathing heavy and ragged. "You have no idea what you are giving up," he murmured against her skin, his voice thick with emotion. "Once you make this choice, there is no turning back. You are mine, Lana, in this life and whatever comes after." "Then it's a good thing I'm not afraid of the dark," she whispered back, tangling her fingers in his dark hair. 6 months later, the grand salon at the Baccarat Hotel was completely locked down. The heavy mahogany doors were guarded by men in tailored suits, but inside, the atmosphere was one of pure, unadulterated triumph. The room where a terrified mother had once ambushed a stranger was now transformed into a breathtaking sanctuary of thousands of white orchids, warm candlelight, and a soaring string quartet. The elite of New York's high society mingled with the quiet, powerful figures of the Moretti Syndicate, an intricate tapestry of power and elegance. In the front row, Camilla Moretti dabbed at her striking blue eyes with an antique lace handkerchief, looking every inch the proud, undisputed matriarch. As the music swelled, the doors parted. Lana walked down the aisle. She was no longer wearing borrowed clothes or playing a terrified hostage. Dressed in a breathtaking, custom Vera Wang gown of silk and tulle, she radiated genuine, terrifying confidence. She walked toward the altar, where Silas stood waiting. He was magnificent in a stark black tuxedo, but it was his face that made Lana's breath catch. The cold, calculating Don was gone, replaced by a man looking at the sole ruler of his heart. When she reached him, Silas took her hands in his. His thumb lightly traced the massive Russian Duchess diamond that still sat heavily on her finger, soon to be joined by a simple, eternal platinum band. He leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear, his voice a low, intimate rumble, meant only for her. "I warned you, Mrs. Moretti. Silas whispered, a genuine, devastating smile curving his lips. In my world, the lines between pretending and reality have a habit of bleeding together. Lana looked up into his piercing blue eyes, her own smile matching his. Good, she whispered back, leaning in to claim her husband. Because I'm playing for keeps. If you found yourself holding your breath while Lana navigated the deadly, glamorous world of the Moretti Syndicate, you are not alone. The line between survival and undeniable passion is razor thin, and Silas and Lana's journey proves that sometimes the biggest gambles in life happen when you least expect them. Did you expect Harrison to be the traitor, or did you think Enzo Falco had another trick up his sleeve? Let us know your favorite plot twist in the comments below. If you loved this deep dive into Mafia romance, high-stakes drama, and enemies-to-lovers tension, please hit that like button. It helps us bring more incredible, heart-pounding stories to life. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow romance readers, and subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss a chapter of our next thrilling audio drama.